So the first match between the Springboks and the All Blacks has taken place, and now the second test match is just around the corner, happening this weekend. The rematch, both sides with things that they want to improve on. And in this video, I'm going to be giving my All Blacks XP that I would love to see take to the field for test match number 2. Now, that's not the only lineup that I am going to be doing in this video. The first half is going to be what I feel is the safe option. And then the second half of the video is where I'm going to throw in a few wild cards and try and work out what the All Blacks can do to strengthen up that bench a little bit more, as that was one of the main critiques about the All Blacks game that did let them down. But we will start with what I feel is the strongest lineup that they can go with here, although that doesn't really help the bench situation in this case. But the starting front row, number 1, Tamati Williams, number 2, Cody Taylor, number 3, Tyrell Lomax. I feel like they all individually had some decent moments, although out of the 3, I'd say I saw the least of Tamati Williams. We are used to seeing that man dominate a scrum, but with Frans Malherbe in front of him, there wasn't really a lot of go forward happening for the All Blacks. Cody Taylor, overall, I think the lineouts weren't too bad for New Zealand in this contest. And then also Tyrell Lomax, I don't see a way of taking him out of the starting lineup after the performance he had. He made 14 tackles. He's actually involved out wide for one of the 2 Caleb Clark tries, did that little dummy pass, took on that role, and he did do extremely well. In the locking duo, I don't see them making too many big changes here. I think it's going to be Scott Barrett once again at 4 and Tupavai number 5. Both men doing well. Couple penalties going against Scott Barrett. Tupavai winning a big turnover for the All Blacks. I think he's starting to really impress a lot of people, Tupavai, and that is whether he is playing 4 or 5. He can be handy for this All Black side, so I wouldn't make any changes in the locks, but for the second lineup that we give, I've done just that. Number 6, this is where I don't see them making any changes either, and I don't think you can afford to in a second match up against the Springboks. Ethan Blackadder, number 6, Sam Cane, number 7, and then number 8, Ardie Savea. Blackadder, very busy throughout that first test. Actually only registered 13 tackles though, which was the least out of anyone in that All Blacks loose ball trio. Sam Cane having the most tackles out of any All Blacks player. And then Ardie Savea, he was actually 3rd in the overall tackles completed. There was more physicality there than we had seen up against the Argentines. There's still something that's not quite right, I think, about this loose ball trio. And I really just can't put my finger on it in terms of what isn't quite going right. I feel like it's the lack of turnovers that we are seeing. Normally Savea gets himself 1 or 2, but unfortunately, in that first game up against the Springboks, the hands were letting him down. Plus, it was proving extremely difficult to win a penalty for not releasing one. Although Damien Dialende, he made it look extremely easy. I think that man had 3 throughout the overall contest. But Ardie Savea, I want to see a big game from him in the second test match. Same with Blackadder and same with Sam Cane in the 9-10 combination. I actually thought TJ Perenara had a pretty decent game. He was criticised heading into this match of whether or not he would be at the level that is required to play the Springboks. He had some great kicking. The only thing that let him down was his mouth. Now that sounds a bit dodgy, but he just kept talking. And unfortunately, one person that he tried to talk to quite a bit was the referee, Andrew Brace. He was having none of it. Penalised TJ. So TJ did all the hard work of getting a 50-22 just to lose that ground because he couldn't stop talking, which is something that a lot of halfbacks do experience throughout their careers. But for TJ, if he can avoid that part of his game, I think he'll be in the starting lineup again here for the All Blacks. And he seemed to partner quite nicely with Damian McKenzie from the last game that they did play. McKenzie, big responsibility for him once again at fly half up against the Boks. We don't know whether he'll be facing Sasha Feinberg, Ngome Zulu, whether it's going to be Mani Lebok, or whether it will be Hondre Pollard. But either way, McKenzie, I believe, will be the 10 for New Zealand here. Hopefully can have a solid game in the centres. This is where, if it was up to me, I would probably have a change of some regard. But for the second test match, I don't know if you can afford to. Geordie Barrett, number 12. Rieko Ioane, number 13. I just don't feel like they've given Anton Lienert-Brown or Billy Proctor enough opportunity to give them a chance here up against the Springboks. Lienert-Brown, I think, could be a solid option. Perhaps they look at him in the 13 jersey so that they have Ioane close out the game rather than starting it. But Ioane overall, I know we critiqued him a little bit on the All Blacks prediction video, but he had a very solid game. Rieko Ioane, it's just, he still has yet to get himself that big try. And I'm sure as soon as he does, the floodgates will open up. But until then, we're just waiting to see that next gear for Rieko to be able to find. But that moves us on to the back three for the All Blacks. In this contest, I would have Caleb Clark, number 11. I would stick with Will Jordan as the number 14, and then still have Beauden Barrett at number 15. But just tell him, Beauden, stop kicking the ball away in the final couple of minutes. Caleb Clark scoring 2 tries in this last contest up against the Springboks. He mentioned how they were run-ins, but the backline did have to function well to get it out wide to Clark, and that is what happened for the All Blacks. They need that to happen multiple more times throughout the second test match. Will Jordan, he didn't have his strongest game, but at the same time, he still had some decent enough stats on attack. I don't think he had to make a single tackle, though, throughout that game up against the Springboks, which is quite a surprising one. Just means that Kutli Arendse wasn't really receiving the ball either. I think we saw it a lot more that they went out wide to Cheslin Colby when that opportunity was there to kick the ball. And behind Beauden Barrett, number 15, he had some good kicking throughout that first test match. Just whether or not he can get those decisions right in the later stages, because I have a feeling the second test match is going to be just as close, if not closer, than the first one. You need that experience of Beauden Barrett to work in your favour, and if it does, perhaps we see a bit of Beauden Barrett magic. But that is my safe All Blacks XP for this test match. Now we're going to mix it up a little bit. I have done a second starting 15. And I was too scared to have it as the main one in this video, because then you get all the comments of lucky you're not the selector, you're a f***ing idiot. Those are the ones that we're used to seeing. But there are a couple little changes in here, and I don't think they'll do all of them. But I think there are a couple that might actually benefit the All Blacks, not just for this game, but maybe in the long run. So, with that being said, we're jumping into our second starting lineup here. Number 1, Tamati Williams. Number 2, Cody Taylor. Number 3, Tyrell Lomax. No changes in the front row. Bet you didn't see that coming. But I do think that this is still the strongest lineup that they can have in terms of that front row. I would like to eventually see maybe Pasili or Tosi or Fletcher Newell get a chance in that starting side. But I believe that will be up against Australia, not in the second test match, up against the Springboks. As the All Blacks, even though it is slim, they've still got a chance of getting up there in the Rugby Championship standings. The Freedom Cup is on the line, which is probably the more important one that the All Blacks are looking at, seeing as they haven't lost it for 15 years. So I do think you have to go with this lineup, but I do think they also need a bit more from the big man, Tamati Williams, into the locking duo. Like I said, they're not going to do all of these. They probably won't even do one of them. They might even keep the same starting lineup like I did in my original XV. But I'm just brainstorming about this one. Number 4, Tupovai. Number 5, Sam Darry. Now, it's a combination that worked up against the Argentinians. The All Blacks having huge line-out success. Also, Vai really coming into his own throughout that series. Sam Darry, when given a start, does seem to be a very strong option. I don't think they gave him enough minutes off the bench in that first game up against the Springboks. But the reason that they didn't is because the starting combination were doing so well. And then he had to try and find his feet with only like 10 minutes remaining in the game, which was always going to be a massive task up against a side like South Africa, who close out games almost always better than they started them. So that is why I'd have Sam Darry in the starting lineup alongside Tupovai. But then this is where I've moved Scott Barrett to 6. Now, some people really dislike that idea of having a lock as your number 6 in a game. But Scott Barrett, I think anyway, could be exactly what this loose forward trio at the moment for the All Blacks needs. I mentioned about it earlier on. It feels like they're missing something. And maybe that is a big man like Scott Barrett. Yes, Blackadder's active, and he'll cover everywhere on the field all throughout the game. But imagine if the All Blacks can use Blackadder a little bit similar to what a Quagga Smith is for the South Africans. Someone who comes onto the field with 20 minutes or so to go and can get turnovers, can make his tackles and change a game for New Zealand late. So that is why I've got Scott Barrett as that number 6. Once again, just brainstorming. Don't go too crazy just yet. Number 7, this is where I have got Sam Cane, although you could look at Ethan Blackadder as that number 7 option and then have the experience of Sam Cane making his way off the bench, and then Ardie Savea as my number 8. The other option, which I don't think they'll do, but I would love to see, would be moving Savea back to 7 and having Wallace Atiti as the starting 8. But I don't think they'll do that. I also don't think they'll do what I've done here. But it's just putting it out there, seeing what you guys think about it, and whether or not there are little fine-tuning details that we could do to make an even stronger All Blacks team. Not just the starting lineup as well, but the bench. That is the main reason why I've gone with the changes that I have. It's so that I can shore up that bench a little bit more and have more impact coming off the bench later on. And in the game, the 9-10 combination, this is where I have got Cortez Ratama as the starting 9 with Damian McKenzie once again as the starting fly half. I think if you start Ratama, he'll have a lot more chance of having a strong game. He started well up against the Fijians up until he did get his injury. Didn't look great in the matchup against the Springboks, only because, once again, similar to Sam Derry, when you're given that little amount of time, you can't really do a lot. Definitely as a young player. You know, if it was an experienced guy coming off the bench with 10 minutes to go, they've normally been in that scenario before. They know what they have to do. Whereas someone like a Cortez Ratama, that man has had very limited minutes for the All Blacks. So to stick him in the deep end and say, try and stop this Boks forward momentum, it's going to be tricky. It's going to be near impossible. But Cortez Ratama, if he's in the starting lineup, that means that I've got TJ off the bench to add that experience and be there for those important situations. In the centre combination, Jordie Barrett, number 12, Billy Proctor, number 13. Now, Rieko Ioane, like I said, he didn't really have a bad game up against the Springboks, but I also want his pace later on in a game, so that is why I would have him coming off the bench for this game in particular. Now, normally, we would probably see Rieko starting. Anton Lienert-Brown off the bench up against the Springboks in match number 1. It didn't really change too much, which is why maybe Rieko's X factor off the bench could be the big difference maker, whether he joins into the centres or whether he finds himself out on the wing for the later stages of a match. With that pace, could be absolutely awesome. Now, the back 3, this is where I haven't made any changes, although the All Blacks, in the long run, we could see maybe Will Jordan go to number 15 rather than being out on that right wing. That would bring Beauden Barrett off the bench in that case. But for me, I've still got Caleb Clarke, number 11. I think from that first test, as well as any time Clarke has put that All Blacks jersey on recently, he has shown why he should be in that starting lineup. Will Jordan out on the right wing. I do think that that game up against the Boks in the first match was an exception to how strong Will Jordan can be, and then 15 Beauden Barrett. Although if you did have him off the bench, then that would open up the opportunity of either putting him at 10 or putting him at number 15. Now, in these starting XV videos, I don't normally give a bench, which does annoy some people, but for this case, with the lineup that I just mentioned there, that would give you a bench that could look pretty similar to this. Asafa Moa, Ofa Tuangafasi, and Pasilio Tosi as your front row replacements. In the replacement lock, you could put Josh Lord, but you could also consider the fact that there are 3 locks in the starting lineup, which would then mean you could actually play Ethan Blackadder as your number 19, and then have the option of Wallace Atiti or Luke Jacobson. Dalton Papali'i, Sam Cane, if he's not on the starting side, could be there as your number 20. So that is an option that the All Blacks could look at. Have 3 locks in the starting lineup, which would then mean that one of them would go off for a loose forward and then have a bit of a reshuffle so that you still have enough locking cover in the later stages. Because in that scenario, you also take away the option of having to do a 6-2, which I know that a lot of people are pushing for the second test match. They feel like New Zealand, they need 6 forwards just to be able to close out a game. But I think something that normally makes New Zealand much more dangerous in the later stages of a game when they're in form is those extra back replacements. Having the 3 options off the bench for the backs. In my bench here, you could have TJ Perenara as your number 21. Then you've got the options of Anton Lienert-Brown, Rieko Ioane, Sevu Reece, Mark Talia, or maybe one of those other options such as a Ruben Love or someone like that. But more than likely, For me anyway, I would actually stack the centres. I would have Anton Leonard-Brown and Rieko Ioane, and then have that option of playing Ioane out on the wing, or maybe a transition Proctor out, but more than likely they'd only pick one of those two, so then in that case, you've got Talia or Severis in that number 23 jersey. But do let me know what you think of the two lineups. Of course, I think the first one will be more popular, and like I said, the second one is not what I think they will go with. It's just a lot of changes all in one, because or else then I'd have to make about 3 different videos of saying why I think they should change this one, why I think they should change that. Instead, I just shove them all into one so that I have mentioned them so that you guys can let me know, would you like to see any of those changes? Or maybe there's another one that I didn't mention that you would like to see do. Let me know. But nonetheless, thank you all very much for tuning in. The All Blacks will be announced on Thursday for the upcoming match up against the Springboks. It's going to be an entertaining second game to see what changes both of these sides are going to make, not just in their lineups, but also in their tactics when they make their way onto the field. But thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you all for the next one.